and urged us to stick close to custom, history, and experience in all things. Which brings us to the heart of what's wrong with today's idolization of the Enlightenment. Its leading figures were not skeptics, open to what history and experience might teach us. Their aim was to create their own system of supposedly infallible truths independent of experience.
I mean, this is quite amazing to me, coming from somebody religious who is advocating for his own infallible truths.
Well, it's post-Kantian, right? So religious people, the current mindset of intellectual religionists is we're all bullshitting ourselves about this stuff. Don't tell me you scientific person isn't. I'll accept that my religion is just my thing that I believe. I think it's true, and the greatest truths are things you can't prove, and they're not infallible, and you can't base them on experience. And if you think otherwise, well, I'll show you that your thing is no better than my God. Your science is no better. And that's the kind of tone that religious defense has taken really since Kant. And this is a Kantian argument. This whole thing is the essence of Kant right here. This is what Kant's all about. This is what denying knowledge in order to make room for faith is. I mean, Kant would think of this as a sniveling version of it, but it is this kind of move. And you see it in tons of other, if you think about philosophical defenders of religion, people like William James, for example, and all the people who come after him, it's not building up religion, but tearing down any claim to knowledge so that it's on a par with their whims and their religiosity. And so it's not a surprise that we're getting that here.
That's the ultimate insult to Hazoni, is that he's a Kantian, but yes. Onkar?
And so I think to get into their mindset, you have to get the role that tradition is playing. I mean, I don't know how many times tradition has come up in this video. It's probably at least 10 times. And tradition it's a substitute for having reasons. It's we're going to go by it because it's old, and it's 2,000 years. People have that. So I go by Judeo-Christian, and it's a tradition. It's 2,000, and that gives it respectability. And if you think in the way that I mean, take the South Park episode about Mormonism, and it's these tablets that you can't read, and it's portrayed as like this is such incredible BS, which it is. I mean, but it's viewed like that, and Mormonism was viewed like this is weird, and people are driven west and so on, only because it's new. If you go back to the history of Christianity, it looks exactly like this. But because it has 2,000 years, that gives it some kind of respectability, that if some prophet now comes along and says all this, well, that's crazy talk. And so tradition, it has no meaning to me. I put both in the category of it's completely crazy and arbitrary. But to them, it's such a sanction that it's old. That's what allows me to latch onto that and not onto these newfangled Rousseau things. So, because you're one, like he puts it in the category, these are people claiming absolute truth. And so isn't this just like your prophets? And the reply is like, it's a stupid reply, but you really have to get, they think it is, yeah, but our prophets are old.
And the other thing is, these counter-Enlightenment people are skeptics, and the Enlightenment wasn't skeptical. Now, the idea of pro-experience in the sense of based on the evidence of the senses is central to the Enlightenment from at least Locke on. I mean, Locke and Newton, if you think there are like four main patron saints of the Enlightenment, and one of them gets brackets and gets dropped off half the time, right? Which is Descartes. And the other three are Bacon, Locke, and Newton. These are founders of the scientific method. They're greatest exponents. They're people, I don't make hypotheses, says Newton, I go by the facts. Locke is the one who's teaching us to trace all our conclusions back to experience. He's the godfather of empiricism. Often said, I don't think he actually is quite rightly understood that way, but nevertheless, experience as the source of all knowledge. If you look at the encyclopedists, they say, you know, some of us further with Descartes, but really Locke and the basing everything on experience is the way, the road to knowledge. So the idea that experience is not part of the Enlightenment is crazy talk, and it's ahistorical, and it's a lie, because anyone who has any kind of history of philosophy knows better. Then on the other hand, skepticism. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, and the idea that a religionist would lecture you on the importance of experience, right? When for them, truth is in a book, right? Truth is in a book somewhere, irrelevant to what's actually occurred in real life and in the world out there, is just astounding.
And then with skepticism, the other main thing going on in Enlightenment thinking is a kind of sense that all the stuff that has been passed down to us as knowledge by authorities, there's a lot wrong with it. We have to check it. We can't be sure it's right. Maybe we can't know anything. And so if you think about Descartes as an early Enlightenment figure, right, he's attempting to use skepticism to be as skeptical as he can, to find some bit that he can't be skeptical of, that he could build the rest of knowledge on. Now, I think that was a mistake on Descartes' part, but the idea of finding uses for skepticism, of checking, of not being too sure of yourself too early, that's central to this tradition, so much so that it gives rise to literal skeptics like Hume, who is generally seen as an Enlightenment figure and as a skeptic. Now, you can argue both. Is he really a skeptic? Is he really Enlightenment? But the idea that engaging with skepticism in the modern sense of being a critical thinker, is not part of the Enlightenment is, again, a lie. And I think really a lie. And a lot of these Prager videos, by the way, contain things that are lies, like Dennis Prager saying he talks to philosophy professors and none of them think there's any objective ground for philosophy. He's never met an atheist who holds this. I mean, Prager, you've met Prager, haven't you, Yaron? Yes, and Alex has done. I mean, he knows that that's not true when he says it. And and this, again, these are lies. They're not just misstatements, I think.
Okay.
And in that pursuit, they were as rigid as the most dogmatic medievals. Anglo-Scottish conservatives had a very different goal. They defended national and religious tradition, even as they cultivated what they called a moderate skepticism, a combination that became known as common sense. I think a lot about common sense these days, as I see American and European elites clamoring for enlightenment now. They rush to embrace every fashionable new ism, socialism, feminism, environmentalism, and so on, declaring them to be universal certainties and the only politically correct way of thinking.
So he's really here trying to link the Enlightenment to all these, the enemies, right? The leftist ideas, the leftist isms that he views as the enemies of tradition, religion, and nationalism.
Yeah, and this would be persuasive to someone who's never met actual leftists and only knows what they hear about leftists from Prager or Fox News or something. Actual leftists aren't pro-Enlightenment. Steven Pinker is now being castigated by the whole leftist academia for being pro-Enlightenment. The leftists are anti-Enlightenment and have been explicitly for a long time. It's imperialistic, Western, male, hegemonic, all of this, in their view, allegedly. Yeah. And new ideas like socialism, I mean, these ideas are old.
So what's missing here, but it relates to putting Hume and Adam Smith as their Enlightenment critics. So they defended religious tradition. Like, that is a description of Hume is ridiculous, that's what he was doing. I mean, he's viewed as one of the people attacking traditional religion, and I think rightly so. And what you get, part of the product of the Enlightenment is capitalism. So to say that it's responsible for progress, of what he's quoted Pinker early on, it's because it brought us capitalism, not its socialism and environmentalism. It was capitalism, industrial production. And if you think of that as on the side of the Enlightenment, and that's what Hazoni's asking us to toss aside, and he thinks he's an opponent of socialism, and this really is. It's flabbergasting.
Yes, it really. All right, I'm going to play to the end, and then I've got some super chat questions that we could dig into.
They display contempt towards those who won't embrace their dogmas, branding them unenlightened, illiberal, deplorable, and worse.
It just, I have to say, I mean, this coming from the right, which does exactly the same thing to anybody who disagrees with them.
But these new dogmas deserve to be greeted with some of that old Anglo-Scottish skepticism. Enlightenment overconfidence in reason has led us badly astray too many times. I'm Yoram Chazoni, author of The Virtue of Nationalism for Prager University.
All right, let me get rid of the share. There we go. All right, any summarizing thoughts, and then we'll take some of these questions. No, we've said it. Okay.
One is that this is dishonest.
Yeah, it
This
really
is not an
Yeah.
attempt to educate you, and an attempt to share even an opinionated, slanted perspective on the history. This is dishonest.
Yep.
And I think a lot of the YouTube videos on different topics are. I don't think it's even ignorant. I think it's slanted in ways that are dishonest. And you should not take our word on these figures or Rand's word. If you're interested in this history, read a number of sources, read some of the original sources, and read people who are actually historians. And I suggested a few sources earlier that are good starts for the ideas of the period. But this is a joke, and it's a dishonest joke.
And if you take, I mean, to go back to how you frame the discussion you're on about that this is an important issue. If you think of what Pinker is interested in, he's interested in the fact of what they call, I mean, most of the time now it's put as the hockey stick graph, that human history has been relatively stagnant, some progress, and then an incredible acceleration, unprecedented, undreamt of, and this is the miraculous aspect of it. And how do you explain this? And Pinker saying you have to understand the ideas and ideals embraced during the Enlightenment period, which is when this acceleration starts to happen. And his reply to that is, oh no, if you can find some guy in the 15th century talking about something like this, and maybe in the 12th century, one guy somewhere in a monastery said this and that, there's no real interest in trying to explain how do you get this incredible prosperity. His message at the end is, don't be overconfident in your use of reason. That's the message. Rather than like, how did we get this? And there's no explanation, no attempt to explain it. It's just to try to take over the achievement and say, oh, it was really religious people and tradition-bound, unthinking conservatives who are responsible.
Yeah, no, and that question, the question of how did we get here and what happened in this hockey stick, is the most important question in the social sciences. I mean, there's no more important a question than that. And Pinker recognizes that, and at least is making an effort. You know, the book is flawed, there are problems with it. His ideas are flawed and the problem, but he's making an honest effort to try to understand it. I mean, this video suggests that Hazoni and the people who sponsor these kind of videos have no interest in a real, honest look at what brought us the kind of prosperity and the kind of successful life that the West, at least, really the whole world has enjoyed now for 200 years.
And what you see in Pinker and the Enlightenment cheerleaders, and it's not the whole establishment's cheering the Enlightenment and all the liberals are, maybe that was true in the 40s or something, but it's not been true since the 60s. It's not like the left is, it's this small coterie of intellectuals who are trying to bring back respect for the Enlightenment, and Pinker's one of them. And what's distinctive about these people and the people who are now starting the field of progress studies and so forth, is that these are people who are valuers, who notice that there are things good in the world and want to know where they come from and are thinking about that. And this religious conservative backlash to it does not have an alternative to it, is not claiming some other real source of values that has any plausibility. What it is a nihilistic movement. It's a, we don't like where reason is leading us. We don't like the people who celebrate reason. We don't want to question our traditions. We don't want to think why did things go well and then what happened to make them not go well. And we're afraid to challenge our altruism. And so we are going to take our pistol and point it at the human head and pull the trigger and say reason is not a value. Oh, reason's scary. Everything bad comes from reason and individuals. And what we need to do is be craven huddlers in traditions, the same as the intersectional feminists and the Black Panther and the this, that. We want to be tribal, collective, craven, going by our tradition and our glands and our instincts.
I mean, there's a sense in which they all recognize that the real enemy is the Enlightenment, and that's why both on the left and on the right, they're all attacking people like Steven Pinker. People are trying to, find the roots of our success in the Enlightenment, because they realize that it's reason and individualism that are real enemy, and they're the enemy of the right, and they're the enemy of the left, and everybody's going after them. Okay.
Down through history, various political and philosophical movements have sprung up, but most of them have died. Some, however, like democracy or communism, take hold and affect the entire world. Here in the United States, perhaps the most challenging and unusual new philosophy has been forged by a novelist, Ayn Rand. Miss Rand's point of view is still comparatively unknown in America, but if it ever did take hold, it would revolutionize our lives. And Ayn, to begin with, I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize, I know this is difficult, can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it Objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute, that man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it, and that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
How does objectivism differ from the philosophies that many of us have been exposed to in our youths? Philosophies based upon religions, theologians, dogmatists.
The very first difference, objectivism tells you that it is not right, it is not proper to man to take anything on faith. Religion is a matter of faith. You accept a religion emotionally or because you were born to it. You have not chosen it rationally. What objectivism will tell you is that reason, man's reason, is his basic means of survival. That is the most important faculty which he has, and he has to guide his life and make his choices by means of his rational faculty. He has to make his own choices, but he has to know how to make them. It is immoral for him to act on his emotions, to be guided by the whim of the moment. That objectivism holds as very wrong, very immoral. And morality, in fact, consists of following your reason to the best of your ability. So that rationality is the basic virtue from which all the others proceed.
My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people, nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
Tell me the value of selfishness.
Use another word, self-esteem. The value of selfishness is that you esteem yourself as a value, that you live according to your nature, which means by the judgment of your own mind, and you respect your own mind, you respect your own ability to do the right thing, therefore you respect the possibility of being a morally virtuous person, and you regard yourself as a value worth preserving. To make a success of yourself in any line of rational activity is a great virtue. And people will attack you for exercising your ability, for hard work, for consistency, for ambition. And they will want to make you feel guilty of it. Mm-hmm. That is the greatest evil, according to my philosophy.
And wait, say that again. The greatest evil, according to your philosophy, is to attack an individual because of virtue.
What I call it is to experience or act on hatred of the good for being the good. That is attacking people for their virtues, for their achievements, for anything they have which is a value, actually, not for their flaws and not for their evil. In fact, people who preach that are the ones who are mawkish about the evil people, the failures, the liars, the cheats. Everybody who is weak suddenly acquires some kind of value. But anyone who is a success has to be attacked for his success.
And look at how you have been attacked.
Oh, I know.
How you have been criticized.
You know that?
There are many people in this country, forgive me, in this world who think you're daft.
They don't. They want you to listen to that.
Using the super chat, and I noticed yesterday when I appealed for support for the show, many of you stepped forward and actually supported the show for the first time. So I'll do it again. Maybe we'll get some more today. If you like what you're hearing, if you appreciate what I'm doing, then I appreciate your support. Those of you who don't yet support the show, please take this opportunity. Go to yaronbrookshow.com/support or go to subscribestar.com, Yaron Brook Show, and make a kind of a monthly contribution to keep this going. I'm not sure when the next